Hi, this is Irregular Magazine. I'm Jason, and today we're going to look at some of the more bizarre battles that have occurred throughout history. We're going to look at just a couple of those that have happened. War's annals overflow with tragedy, heroism, and strategic genius, except when they don't. Sometimes history sums up a conflict that's so bizarre and out of the ordinary, it's so steeped in comic irony that they resemble a rejected Monty Python script. From the apian allies to poultry prophecies, these battles prove that human folly knows no bounds. Now, the first one we're going to look at is the stinging defeat. It's the Battle of Tanga in 1914. Now, the premise is it's World War I's earliest days. Britain dispatched 8,000 elite Indian troops to seize Germany's East Africa port of Tanga. Victory seemed certain against a mere 200 German colonials and local askaris. Now, the farce unfolds. As this farce unfolds, um, General Arthur Aitken, whose military expertise was frozen in the sort of 19th century, dismissed warnings about German-trained African troops. He regarded them as black savages that will flee at the sight of the British bayonet. His intelligence officers lamented the troops were the dregs of the Indian army. The invasion fleet idled offshore for about 16 days, fearing this phantom German cruiser. Soldiers baked in the sweltering holds while officers sipped gin on the luxury liner Kamala. Now, the captain politely asked if Germans had mined the harbour, and the answer was yes. Though this wasn't entirely the truth. They hadn't really mined that harbour. So the British then spent hours sweeping for non-existent mines. As the British forces then floundered in jungle terrain, swarms of African honeybees, which were disturbed by gunfire, started to attack both sides. Panicked Indian troops dropped rifles and ran, screaming. A German officer dryly noted, "You British treat war like a game." Now, the aftermath, 2 days post this sort of chaotic skirmish, over 1,500 British casualties, and there was zero gains. And the British retreated. They left behind 16 machine guns, 455 rifles, and around 600,000 rounds, which were considered gifts for the Germans, so to speak. Aitken was sacked, and the bees became history's tiniest victors. Our next battle we're going to look at is nicknamed the Royal Retreat. It was Liechtenstein's +1 war in 1866. Now, tiny Liechtenstein, with an army of about 80 men, joined Austria against the Prussians because basically peer pressure. The combat was picnics over pistols. Deployed against Italy, Prussia's ally, both sides ignored orders. Liechtensteiners hiked into the Alps, Italians napped in the meadows, and occasional shots were fired, mainly into the air, to maintain the sort of appearances of combat, so to speak. Then there was this mysterious 81st man. Post-war, Liechtenstein's contingent returned home with an extra soldier. Turns out he was a lost Austrian liaison officer, and the Liechtensteiners said they adopted him. He was nice, they said. So the legacy was that there were zero captures, one new soldier, and a national legend of diplomatic avoidance. So the third one we're going to look at, we'll entitle it The Sacred Chicken Debacle. It was the Battle of Janappa, I think that's how you pronounce it, in 249 BC. Basically, the Romans consulted sacred chickens before naval battles. If the birds ate, the gods favoured a victory, and if not, they would have bought the mission. Now, at Drepna, starved chickens basically refused to eat, and Admiral Claudius Pulcher, so enraged, he flung them overboard, with the declaration of "let them drink" instead. His fleet promptly sank by the Carthaginian navy, and Pulcher faced exile and possibly the angry chicken god. While Tanga's bees reign supreme, other wars rival its absurdity. In 1329 was the War of the Oaken Bucket. Bologna stole Moderna's bucket, and they went to war. It resulted in 2,000 dead, and the bucket still remains in Moderna. Then there's a pig war of 1859, when a British pig was shot by an American farmer. There were no casualties, apart from the pig, and that lasted around 4 months, and I've done a video on that. Then there's the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. The Sultan refused the British ultimatum, and it lasted 38 minutes with 500 Zanzibars dead. Then there's the more bizarre one in 1969, often called the Soccer War. It was Honduras were playing El Salvador in the World Cup, and afterwards riots erupted. Now, what happened was there were 4,000 people killed, and it was basically over a disallowed goal. Then there's the potato masher panic in 1943. A US destroyer, outgunned by a Japanese sub, pelted sailors with potatoes. Japanese, mistaking them for grenades, hid, which then allowed the destroyer to open fire. Now, there's a thin line between comedy and tragedy. These battles aren't just sort of jokes or comedic. They have consequences. There's a war's underlying madness. Everything from Aiken's colonial arrogance to Roman ritualistic laziness, dismissal of reality invites cosmic ridicule. The fog of war thickens miscommunication. Liechtenstein's drumless battle or superstition over chickens can dictate outcomes more than actual tactics. For soldiers in trenches, dark humour was often a survival mechanism. As one Tanga veteran wrote, "We laughed so we wouldn't weep." In the end, history's most ludicrous battles remind us that whilst war is hell, sometimes it has a punchline. Now, we've only looked at a few of sort of the more obscure, ludicrous things that have happened throughout military history. There was a case where a cavalry unit charged a naval ship because they were able to, because of the frozen ice. And it's probably, I think it's the only time a cavalry unit have captured a ship. And there are other things that happen throughout history that are quite ludicrous, but they can even make good scenarios. It also means that your war game scenarios can have that little touch of ludicrous and madness added to them to make them a bit more fun. Because these things happen in real life. So why not, if you're doing a campaign, chuck in a battle that's quite, on paper, sounds utter bonkers, because it might just be quite a fun night of gaming. And yeah, you're not stepping out of reality, because ludicrous happens in real life. So we've touched on a few of the battles here that are quite mad, and some other bits and pieces. And I think we should occasionally add some of this sort of comedic madness into our war games occasionally, because in reality that happens as well. and just to sort of spice things up and add a bit of fun, bit extra fun to a game. Anyway, that's all for me for this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I shall see you next time.